Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker, Literary Aviatrix, and I am excited to talk with the author of the March 2025 Aviatrix Book Club discussion book, Lady Flyer. Fewer than 10% of pilots and aircraft mechanics are women. These are their stories of tenacity, adventure, and courage. Stories with the power to inspire, heal, and connect. Welcome to the Literary Aviatrix community, where we leverage the power of story to build and celebrate our community and inspire the next generation of aviation. Hello again. I'm Liz Booker, Literary Aviatrix, and I am back with Heather B. Moore, the author of the March Aviatrix Book Club discussion book, Lady Flyer, about Nancy Harkness Love. It is a biographical fiction, and in the first portion of our interview, we kind of talked in depth about that. But I want to go a little deeper. But I want to roll it back to what you talked about in the first portion of our interview about you started writing when you were 30, you joined some critique groups and those kinds of things. So what resources, I started writing like halfway into my career, and same thing happened to me. I was like, I'm a reader. So let me write this idea that I have. And then I wrote it and I discovered that it was actually garbage and I needed to learn how to write. And so I navigated my way. So talk about some of the resources that you tapped into to develop your writing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, obviously, there are books out there on the craft of writing. There's a couple that I have used and read and reread. There are, well, I live in Utah, and there's quite a big writing community here.
Yes.
And there's a lot of conferences. So I started attending writers' conferences and going to like a class on plotting, a class on character development. And so to me, I went to high school, I took all those English classes and creative writing. I went to college, I majored in fashion merchandising and business management. So not very many creative writing classes in there, but obviously you write all the time in college. But this was like the first time I was focusing on developing a craft and as an adult, because I think sometimes when you're in school, you're just doing your homework, right? And so I was doing conferences. As we mentioned, I was in a critique group. We met every week. And so it became something that I was prioritizing. And if my kids were in bed, instead of watching whatever TV series back then, we didn't have Netflix, but see, if you didn't see it that night, you didn't see it at all. Right.
Right.
And so, but I started like thinking I'd rather write than watch the show or do something else half the time. And so I could tell it was kind of becoming a little bit all consuming in some ways. But I was also going to some university, like community college classes where, there's like those night classes, I guess. And remember one author saying how she just set word count goals. She'd do 2,000 words a day, 5 days a week. And I had never really thought about it that way, but it ended up becoming like the bread of life for me, because that's what I do still today. Is when I know I have a book to write and I know when my deadline is, I work in the word count. And so I have 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm just researching. And then I start with my goals, my writing goals. And that helps me obtain that goal in the day, but also helps me stop. So I'm not using it to consume my life, because when it consumes your life, then you can definitely hit burnout.
That is so great. I love the way that you put that together, and it's really helpful for me right now. I'm still struggling with my writing, so I you kind of hear things when you need to hear them sometimes. So I appreciate that, and hopefully that helps some other people too. So you mentioned that you had written a couple of books before you found a publisher. So tell me about that journey. How did you what got you in the door? Did you find an agent? Do you still have the agent? Talk about that.
Yeah, so I'm actually on my third agent, but I didn't start out with an agent. I was submitting to agents or submitting to publishers with those first couple books, and then I actually looked at. I was in this critique group, and some of my critique group members were publishing with a local publisher. It's just kind of a smaller press, but when you first start writing, you're like, well, I want to be, with Random House or whatever. and or on the New York Times list. And they're like, well, okay, I've been doing this for a few years. I think I'm just going to, go small, which is good because it was the perfect path for me. So I specifically researched the local publishers and what they're publishing, what were in our bookstores. And I wrote a book specifically, hopefully specifically for their target market. And it was one I was happy with. It was actually kind of more of a religious book, like Christian fiction type of a story. And so that's what I started publishing in. And then as I finally got, that was it's kind of a long story how I finally got published with them. It took almost a year and a half. But I also had some thrillers I was writing that wouldn't fit with this publisher. So I thought, okay, so then that journey became trying to find an agent. And eventually I was able to meet an agent at a conference. And she originally turned down the book that I had pitched to her. And then I ended up going through this very, very small press in Idaho. And the thriller did really well on Amazon. This is back when Amazon was pretty new. So if you put your book on 99 cents, you sell like 5,000 copies. It was like crazy.
Ah,
But now you do that and you sell
yeah,
like 30 copies,
yeah.
Um, and it got the attention of Amazon Publishing. So you have Amazon KDP, which is self-publishing, and you have Amazon, which is called APUB, and they have several traditional imprints. So it got the attention of a traditional imprint. So then now I suddenly had a traditional imprint wanting this thriller. And so I'm like, well, I need an agent. So I went back to the agent that had originally turned down the book because I just liked her and I felt like I'd met her and we had a good rapport. Anyway, so she represented the book. And then this is really funny. So the contract was done. So then I had to get my rights back from the small publisher. So the contract was done between my agent and Thomas and Mercer is the name of the Amazon imprint. And about 3 months after the contract was done and I was going through like a new round of editorial, my agent emailed me and said, I read your book and I enjoyed it. So she hadn't even read it when she turned it down. So what happens is most agents have
Girl,
gatekeepers. Yeah, it drives you nuts, right?
sorry. No, I'm just like, I'm not sure that she would have been the right match for me, but
Yeah.
you keep going.
Anyway, it's all good.
You sound
It
great.
all ended up fine. But so it was just probably her assistant that read it or one of her gatekeepers that read it.
No, right.
And anyway, so
Into the slush pile. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm still with that agency. But I actually, and that agent still represents my thriller. I don't write thrillers anymore, but I'm with another agent in the group that represents all my historicals with Shadow Mountain. So,
Well, that's cool. And so have you like, is Shadow Mountain kind of like publishing pretty much everything you write and you just get prompts
um,
from them, or how does
no,
this?
I've actually only written for Shadow Mountain since 2020. So my first book came out with them in 2020, but
Mhm.
the original small Christian publisher I started out with, so I still write for them. I still write biblical fiction for them, and I write under HB Moore for them. And
Okay.
then I also self-publish. I have my own imprint called Mirror Press, and I self-publish just like little romance series. I do a lot of anthologies with other authors. So I do a lot of collaborating and co-writing.
Oh, is that fun? Tell me about that.
Yeah,
Say more about
it's
that.
really fun. Yeah, we have like probably I think it's been like 12 years since I've been doing self-publishing, and we have a line called the Timeless Romance Anthologies, and they're just like 3 to 6 novellas in each book, but we kind of use it just as cross promoting our readerships. So it's a fun collaboration and
That's
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
I love
So,
that so much. I'm all about cross promotion
yeah.
and I just absolutely love that. You're making my wheels turn. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Well, and I should have asked you this in and I will add it to my closeout from the first portion of the interview, but where can we find all of that work? That's all on your website?
Um, yeah, my website actually hbmore.com. Um, there is a very famous Heather B. Moore out there. She's a wonderful jewelry
Yeah,
designer.
she keeps popping up every time I
Yeah,
look for
that's
you.
not me,
Yeah.
but maybe someday I'll be able to afford something she's created. But just Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I think just the standard places. Just Heather B. Moore. I always say don't forget the B. There is another Heather Moore author that has some books out, but not the same author.
Yeah.
And just online, some Barnes and Noble. Usually Barnes and Noble will carry my very first book I wrote for Shadow Mountain is called The Paper Daughters of Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about the history of human trafficking in Chinatown in San Francisco.
Oh, cool.
And it's written as a novel, but that book is the one that just seems to have some staying power. And so if you go to Barnes and Noble, they usually will have that book.
Fascinating. I mean, I'm so excited
Yeah.
about your other work now, and especially since I've read this and read your or halfway through it
Yeah.
and read your writing. I cannot wait to dig into the rest of your other stuff. Is there anything? Okay, well, so what do you struggle with? I mean, you did mention like having a word count kind of to stop during the day so you don't
Hmm.
burn out. That's great advice. And I also had somebody else that another thing that has helped me recently is like don't work until you're finished with an idea or a scene. Like stop short of the kind of finish line on it so
Hmm.
that you come back to it excited to work on it tomorrow. I thought that was good advice. But what do you struggle with as a writer?
Yeah, I actually have friends that that do that. Like they purposely stop in the middle of a scene so that when they come back, they're like, oh, they're ready to sit down and finish that scene because it's
Yeah.
been like percolating in their head. Probably my, I'd have to say one of my struggles of writing is, well, I'm a pantser. So it makes writing really fun, but it also makes you feel like you're at loose ends a lot because I'll sit down and I don't know what I'm going to write that day. I mean, if I'm finishing the scene, then I finish the scene, but I don't know what chapter 2 is going to be.
Mm.
And even though if I have like a general idea, and I have plotted before, but it always kind of ends in a disaster. Like I follow the plot for like 3 chapters and then I realize, well, I'm missing a character who ends up being the main character. And so the whole, anyway. So for me, pantsing is a way to go, but it also, I think is, I don't know, it just sounds kind of silly because I know it's my writing method and my writing style, but also it's a little harder to sit down and think, okay, I have no idea where I'm going today, but I got to do it. It just has to happen. Because whatever, I have a deadline, or I'll say, oh, well, Monday I have to start a brand new book and I don't know how it's going to happen, but 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to be writing it. So,
Well, man, I want you to know that you're really inspiring me. This is one of the things that, I kind of tell people like, if nobody else ever listens to my interviews, I feel privileged to have, an hour long conversation with an author and to be personally mentored. And I think I'm in a place right now where I haven't done an interview since last year.
mhm.
And I forget how much I missed this and how
Yeah.
inspired I am and energized I am by hearing, our fellow authors talk about the writing. So thank you. I want to go. I'm sorry. I got to go. I want to go right right now. So thank you so much for that. Is there any advice or anything that you haven't talked about that you would like aspiring writers to know?
Yeah. So I firmly believe in having multiple plans. I mean, it's okay. I mean, because when you start getting rejected, then you just feel like, now what?
Hmm.
You're like, you can literally feel depressed or you want to stop or give up. I
Hmm.
think if you look at it from because business obviously is very creative, or writing is very creative, but publishing is 100% business.
Hmm.
Um, and a publisher, they're really taking a risk because they think, oh yeah, write this wonderful book about Nancy Harkness love, and maybe if that was the first book in my career, it wouldn't have a very big reach. But now that it's I've been writing for 20 years, there's people that would say, oh, I loved Heather's last book, so I'm going to read this book.
Hmm.
Becomes like an auto buy. So, but you have to understand that that even like me, even like I'll still have things turned down. But if I look and I say, okay, this book, I'm just starting. My goal is to get an agent so that I can, have a crack at one of the bigger publishers. And so, yeah, so do that for 6 months or a year. Find an agent, go to conferences, do the queries, whatever you need to do, but set a timeline for yourself because life is short, is way too short. And the opportunities, you might be closing doors without realizing it. So if you don't find an agent, then what? Well, in the meantime, you're writing your next book, right? But with that book, you have certain goals on, then you say, well, I'm going to submit to publishers, or I'm going to go to conferences and pitch to an editor, and I'm going to start networking that way. And then maybe if this book in 18 months, I don't have my first book published, I'm going to look into self-publishing. or work with someone that can help me do it, or collaborate. Maybe I have another book I'm interested in, maybe co-author with someone that already has a little bit of a following as well, or jump into an anthology, or write an article. And so it's just like not putting all your eggs into one basket. Like, spread yourself out and look for opportunities. And I think that will come. And just like what you're doing, like you're elevating my career and my writing and making me feel like, well, I'm a little bit important because
You're a
Liz
little bit
likes my
important.
book, and
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like, she's a pilot, and she has this huge like career that I admire.
Aw.
And you're out there making difference in the world, and I'm home in my little corner office, typing
Turning
away. And
away.
so,
Well,
but I think we can all just elevate and work together. And so that's why I like just not thinking, oh, this book, if I don't get an agent for this book, then I'm going to give up. Don't give up. Just persevere. There's a lot of opportunities out there.
so great. And it's so great to hear that from somebody who has achieved so much wonderful success. I think that you sound like you were an early adapter, an innovator. You kind of figured this stuff out early, whereas now there are really so many options, and we've talked about
Yeah.
so many of them in my interviews in the writers' room. So many options to get your book and get your story out there, and to do it well.
Yeah.
It's not vanity publishing anymore. You can do this well if you just use the resources that are available that weren't really readily available in the same way that they are like 20 and 30 years ago. So, Heather, thank you. I can't wait to meet you in Denver at the Women in Aviation International Conference, where you'll be signing books. And, we'll be there with 30 other authors. I can't wait to just be surrounded by all that energy. It's going to be a great time.
Yeah. I am so excited for that. It'll be wonderful to meet you at last in person.
Yes, ma'am. All right.